Hi, everyone, and welcome. It's Neil Haley here, and I tell you on the Neil Haley Network, and I'm creating a lot of amazing shows. And one show, it's going to be on my radio network and also podcast, is Stack Your Own Deck. And I'm excited to talk to this guest and also my co-host because of his expertise in the healthcare industry. So I'm excited to welcome the program Larry Bradley, host of Stack Your Own Deck. Larry, how are you? And almost Happy New Year, but it's exciting to end the year with this launching this show.
It sure is, Neil. How are you doing today? It's great to connect, and I'm also very excited about what we're going to be sharing with our listeners as far as it relates to their health and well-being. It's some really great stuff.
And it's great. And again, people could be watching also on YouTube, and we're going to have it on a lot of different other platforms. And we're really excited about this development because the ultimate goal is we got to get healthier in 2019. And it's not just going to be this fad diet or this quick fix. It has to be a change of lifestyle. And that's what Larry is going to bring to the table because he too has had to do that in his life as well, Larry, right? Because you're a busy guy. As you could tell your background and how you travel all over the world all the time, that you're so busy, you really have to look out for your health.
Constantly on the road, which makes a healthy lifestyle a little bit more challenging. So you're right, it makes it a bigger issue for me, but then it forced me to learn to master it, and try to keep myself in the best health I can, because as you said, I'm always on the move, always out talking and speaking with people.
Absolutely. So let's kind of talk about the format. Today's like, I'd say, the pilot show, and we're going to have some great topics to talk about. But can you first tell me about what is Stack Your Own Deck program and why did you create it?
Well, the Stack Your Own Deck program, it's being I run a very large national healthcare plan. So every day I get to see firsthand what's going on in healthcare. And in America, it's not great news. I mean, we're spending more money, 2 times and 3 times more money than any other nation on earth. We're taking more prescription medication than the rest of the world combined. And yet our Surgeon General tells us we're the sickest generation to have ever lived. Now seeing that, and then coupled with personal experience with my daughter, 32-year-old mother of 2, wife, being diagnosed with breast cancer, having had a 0.4% chance of getting it based on testing and family history, and what she's gone through. Between those things, I was compelled to take a deep dive in how do we get healthier, not so much outside of the current medical system, but assist the current medical system. So Stack Your Own Deck is a series of tips, strategies, and secrets that anyone can use practically immediately upon learning them to get themselves to begin a process of being healthier in a very, very sick world.
And that's such an important thing because to stay healthy because of our healthcare costs. That's one thing I wanted to bring up, Larry, because you're involved in this healthcare industry and you're seeing firsthand the costs continue to skyrocket, and it's going to be even more expensive money out of our pockets for healthcare in 2019.
That's correct, Neil. I mean, the rate at which we're doctoring and medicating has got to be reversed. What I like to say is we need a wellness revolution in this country for people to understand that there are many things they can do, and they're not that difficult to make a big change in their health and well-being. Because it's just think of this one side of the equation. It's costing employers $800 billion a year in lost productivity between absenteeism, presenteeism, and sick employees. Not to mention our own personal suffering and out-of-pocket costs, which are going to continue to climb because the model we're working with is unsustainable. It's going to collapse at some point. So people need to take their health into their own hands and start to do things and advocate on their own behalf to make themselves healthier people. And it's not as difficult as it sounds. And that's what really Stack Your Deck's about, is to show the simplicity.
Yeah, and the simplicity seems very important. And when you think about things, and you're talking about healthcare and the state of healthcare, is that we're not going to be able to get doctors or insurance companies to charge less. It's going to have to be, we have to get healthier. And it's really, if people believe that people are going to charge less for their services, imagine us, Larry, saying the same thing. We're going to cut our services, yet perform the same service but get paid less. How many people are going to raise their hand across this country and say, I'll do that, I'll volunteer to do that?
Very few, if any. And the other thing is, you raise a very good point. We don't have the bandwidth in medical care professionals, doctors, nurses, hospitals, facilities, to handle the volume of illness and disease. 70% of our country currently has a chronic disease. Let me give you a statistic too. 70% of the deaths in America today, each year, are attributable to chronic illness. So it's no accident. Think about this. The current generation of adults in America, the rate of diabetes has doubled. The current generation of children has tripled in diabetes. That's a precursor to what's coming our way. The big fear is we're not even going to have the bandwidth to treat these folks. That's why it's so urgent that people take control of their own health. These are external factors, but they're going to matter when you and I need treatment and it's not there to be had, or there's long waits, or the impossible task of just trying to navigate a disease. Why not try not to have one in the first place, or at least manage its conditions? Chronic illness is very manageable to a state of symptom-free. And I don't care which chronic illness you're talking about, diabetes, arthritis, asthma, heart condition, obesity, all of those are manageable to a state of no symptom, if not curable.
Right. As you've been kind of discussing the state of our healthcare, especially you running one of the largest national healthcare plans, is healthcare in America is really in bad shape. We were talking about just the costs alone, but also the state of our health. You talked about mentioning a few things, but there's a lot more that's showing that we're one of the unhealthiest nations in the world, right?
Absolutely. Think about this. In 1960, not very long ago, less than 2% of our children had a chronic illness. Today, 54% of our children have a chronic illness. So if you trend this out, it's easy to see where we're heading. And I'm not even talking about the personal pain and suffering of living with these diseases, or having a loved one trying to live with these diseases and being a caregiver. It affects so many of us. In fact, it affects all of us. It just makes great sense. What shocks me is people are willing to pay the doctor, pay the hospital, pay the pharmacy, and pay the price personally, whether it's loss of time at work, the pain and suffering of having the illness, the drugs that we're taking, as opposed to, for example, take a 30-minute walk every day.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to start out being a 30-minute walk. I get there's some people that it may be difficult to walk to the mailbox, but take that walk, begin a process, begin a journey, and just simply walking every day for 30 minutes would vastly improve anyone's health, especially the 70% of us that have a chronic illness.
And when you talked about personally being touched with health issues, especially your daughter's health issues with breast cancer, were there any other health situations in your family that has made you so passionate about this process of Stack Your Own Deck, starting it?
There were. Both my parents, I lost both my parents at a very young age. In fact, my dad passed at 61 years old and had just been to the doctor on Friday, and the doctor gave him a clean bill, and he passed on a Monday at 61 years old. And then my mom died just a few years after him at 68 years old. So, and that's, what's really affecting me personally right now is, and I don't want to exaggerate the point, and I think a lot of the listeners will relate to this. There's not, I'll say a week that goes by or a couple weeks that go by that I don't learn of somebody I know, care about, or love being newly diagnosed with cancer or some significant illness. And it's just bearing out the reality of what this research is telling us, that we are getting much, much sicker. In fact, they're saying that this generation of children will be the first in many, many decades to live sicker and die younger than their parents. That's horrific.
It's awful. Yeah.
And there's a lot of suffering in between all of that. And there's a lot of cost to the employee and the employer. And the biggest move today in America is, corporate-wise, is to move to high deductible healthcare plans. What we're learning there is upwards of a third or more of people with a high deductible healthcare plan will not doctor because they have to pay out of pocket up to that very high deductible. I recently read a very sad story of a woman and her husband in their 40s with a couple of children. She gets diagnosed with a gallbladder problem. They're going to do surgery. And in the same week she's having a surgery, they're telling her, oh, by the way, you're also a diabetic. And that week that she's having surgery, the husband has a seizure. Long story short, they filed bankruptcy because of the healthcare costs because they're in a super high deductible plan. So today, with her blood test strips, they're $120 for a 3-month
Oh my
supply.
gosh.
And
Yeah.
she could so ill afford them right now that she says, this is sad. I only test my blood when I'm dizzy. That's a
It
horrible
is.
state of
It's
affairs,
terrible.
especially in this great country.
Absolutely. Again, you're listening to Stack Your Own Deck with host Larry Bradley, and really an interesting conversation we're developing. Again, I'm Neil Haley on the Neil Haley Network about this whole process of how we have to get healthier. But we have to look at things in a certain perspective. And that involves, again, our healthcare system and the costs rise. The only thing we can do, as Larry's been talking about, is get healthier. And through getting healthier, we're going to have less trips to the doctors unless it's for our important visits. And we're not going to be diagnosed with these awful diseases or chronic illnesses. And one of the things that we're looking at is pain management as well, Larry. If you weigh more, you're going to have more pain on your joints. You're going to have more pain, muscle pain, and have difficulty walking. All of these things, and chronic pain is one of the major problems in this country as well in the healthcare world, right? Seeing people with chronic pain.
Absolutely. There's a ton of Americans today suffering and unfortunately medicating with chronic pain. And look at the opioid crisis, all having to do with pain. And that's at a critical state in this country where we're losing young people every single day because of it may be something as simple as a modest procedure. I had a son that had an outpatient procedure at a doctor, and the doctor gave him a script for 60 Oxycontin. 60. And I told him, I said, don't even fill it. I said, because you're going to take something much more mild than that. It's too dangerous, but it's a matter of not relying so much on the education of the provider. And I would rely on their education, but it's also about educating yourself around what's the best treatment protocol for me. Listen, doctors and nurses are wonderful people doing wonderful things, but they're not God. They're not imperfect. That's why they call it practicing medicine. So the best advice I would give anyone is to become your own advocate or your own advocate for your loved one who may be suffering. There are so many alternatives, and that's what Stack Your Deck is going to teach people, alternatives that can either take the place of or used in conjunction with traditional medical care. I'm not against traditional medical care. I think it has a critical place, but it's not the sole source of our thriving, if you will, because that's what people need to want to do is thrive, not just survive. And I think so many Americans are in a survival mode, just kind of letting or allowing things to happen to them rather than saying, I want to take charge here. I want to own this. My sad reality, as I always talk about, is you hear people talk about illness, their illness, and they'll say things like my diabetes, my cancer. I tell people all the time, it's not yours. Don't own it. Don't welcome it. It's an unwelcome intruder into your body. And your goal is to eliminate it, not to own it. And it's a simple mind thing, but the mind is very powerful, as people know, especially folks in the medical field. The placebo effect. Placebos work because people think they will. There's no chemical reality to them at all. It's just a sugar pill. And people get the same effect as if they took the real drug. Why? Because the power of their mind. And that's one of the things we talk about also in the Stack Your Own Deck program.
Mm-hmm. Mind is so important because, again, when we're negative, when we think things are going to go wrong, they are going to go wrong. So what is causing all the disease now? And was it always like this? As you talked about, that it wasn't, we mentioned earlier in the show, but what is causing all of it?
Well, I'll tell you, the Centers for Disease Control tells us now that the number one delivery system for disease in America is stress. So here's how that works. If we put ourselves under acute stress, like do a workout, you'll stress the body and then you'll relax and stop exercising and the body will return to normal. That's good stress. But unfortunately today, most of us, if not all of us, are under chronic stress. A bad boss, a bad relationship, health problems, money problems, problems with the kids, problems with the parents, problems with our friends. And these are chronic because we go into fight or flight when we're under stress. So the chemicals start to produce cortisol, epinephrine, norepinephrine. These are good chemicals designed to combat something going wrong in the body when it's stressed. But in a chronic state where we never relieve the stress, we don't stop exercising, but you still have the bad boss, you still have the health or money problems, that stress stays chronic. We're in a constant state because of the chemicals in our body of inflammation. And here's the key. You said, what's the number one? If you could talk to a human cell in any body and say, under what circumstance could you best morph yourself from a healthy cell to a disease cell, that cell would look you in the eye and say, put me in inflammation and I will give you a disease. So it's stress because the stress is creating inflammation. Inflammation is the perfect host and creator of disease in a human body. That's really, I think, the core of the subject. So learning to manage and handle stress and emotions is so vitally critical.
And is that new, people talking about that? You never hear that with doctors when you say, hey, are you so stressed? This is what's causing your disease. This is what's maybe leading to your cancer. This is maybe leading to an addiction. Because again, that's another big thing in our healthcare system today, are the amount of addictions of people, alcohol, drugs, all these things are caused by some sort of stress element. Why aren't we focusing more on that, Larry?
Because I'll tell you, in medical school, they don't teach and they don't learn about stress reduction or nutrition's role in a healthy body. What they learn is that this pill handles that. Listen, depression in a human person is not a Prozac deficiency, okay? It's simply not. So learning to handle one's emotions, learning things that you can do that are non-invasive, non-intrusive, non-toxic, scientifically proven, some of them even fun, to mitigate and manage your stress and control your behavior, they're so key to a successful outcome at the end of the day. Doctors are simply not taught. It's not in their wheelhouse. They stay inside their lane. I treat people, I give them a script. Look, some 70+% of doctors' visits end up with a prescription being written. And you know what? Part of that's us, because we're actually one of only 2 nations on earth that allow direct-to-consumer advertising of prescription medication. No wonder we're consuming more prescriptions. I mean, you have people walking in the doctor telling the doctor what drug they want. And we're over-medicated. It's simple. It's as simple as that.
Absolutely.
If I have some issues with my mental stability, depression or whatever, and the first thing they want to do is hand me a drug. And by the way, the drug has a whole list of side effects, including, suicidal thoughts and even death. Why wouldn't I first be encouraged to try something that's not toxic before I go to that? The doctor's not going to say that, and I'm not faulting them. They're just not trained in that discipline. Just like I think the average medical school has less than 3 hours of nutritional training in the entire protocol.
That's crazy.
To become a doctor.
And what we've heard so far in the show leads to how you're setting up Stack Your Own Deck, looking at how to get healthy. So tell us how this program works and how people can utilize that. Especially, we're talking about individuals can utilize it by listening to the podcast or reading up on specific materials that are available at stackyourowndeck.com or on our social media sites, but also your social media sites, Larry. But when it comes to organizations that are looking at how can I lower my healthcare costs for my individuals if I own a business, what I need to do. This program kind of tells you that, right?
Exactly. And in addition to everything you just mentioned as to access to these ideas, strategies, and secrets, if you will, under Stack Your Own Deck, if I was a business owner, I would have a lunch and learn or a miniature work. Listen, we live in a soundbite society. The average American doesn't read a single book after they leave high school or college. That's the average American. We live in a soundbite society. So I believe in the concept with Stack Your Own Deck is less is more. Keep it simple, keep it straightforward. The very second I learn a strategy, tip, or secret, I can implement it immediately. And that's almost every single strategy, tip, and secret in Stack Your Own Deck. So what I would do as an employer is I would introduce the concept, first the book, and then potentially, and the book will be out this right after the first of the year. We're going to launch the book, and that'll contain, all the basics of what we're talking about. And I would suggest a lunch and learn or seminar or workshop in corporations. And I think if you can excite people into simple things that they can do, and that's what this is all about, you'll get more traction more quickly. And then it grows organically. As I realize I'm doing one thing and it feels good and I start to notice a difference, there's a ton of different things in the Stack Your Own Deck program that I can add. It doesn't have to overwhelm me and do it all overnight or at once. Just start with one simple thing and then move on. But I think it's incumbent on employers to take this type of education to their staff.
Yes.
Because if I can make an employee happier, healthier, more present, I'm going to gain from that. Not only is it the right thing to do and humanely correct, and by the way, a lot less expensive on the healthcare side as far as what I'm paying for and what the employee is paying for. So everybody wins with just a little bit of effort to begin with, because success will beget success. When I start to feel good over one thing, I'm certainly going to introduce another and then another and then another. Next thing I know, I have a healthy lifestyle, or at least a healthier lifestyle than perhaps I had. I think that's really the concept.
And this, for the first time, as we have been introducing Stack Your Own Deck out there in the community, our social media, all our followers, all the different people have had you on the show, we've really not broken down the program. And this is what this podcast is going to do, break down the program and learn more and more of how it works for Larry and how it will work for other companies and individuals. Speak of the mess cleanse. What is that?
Okay, so the mess cleanse is, we go back to stress as the number one delivery system for disease, and then why? Because of the inflammation that it creates in the body. Mess cleanse is a mental, emotional, spiritual self-cleanse. People do cleanses on in their physical body. A lot of folks do that, some even routinely. But when have you heard of someone doing a mental, emotional, spiritual cleanse of their mind, of their soul? I call it a detox for the soul. So what we do with that is we look at the primary negative emotions that are causing the stress, that are leading to the inflammation and the disease: anger, fear, guilt, disgust. And we break those down, and we have folks go through a simple process of, one, identifying the things and the situations and the people that cause stress. Many people think stress is stimulated from the external because it appears to, a traffic jam, a bad boss. But the truth is, it's how we're representing those realities to ourselves. I could be internally, I could be in a traffic jam and I could go road rage and get crazy over it and go out of my mind, stress myself to a state of disease, or I could take advantage of a traffic jam as an opportunity to jam out with some great music, or just listen to some soft music, or listen to a great book. So what the mess cleanse does is gives us the opportunity, it guides us through validating and then confronting, and I say addressing each of those emotions as they affect us in our lives, with the people and the circumstances. Circumstances we learn to reframe, people we learn to deal with one way or the other. But take it to, the idea of the mess cleanse is take those emotions that are hurting us to resolution. Because Deepak Chopra, Dr. Deepak Chopra says, and Ayurvedic medicine says, that disease is nothing more than undigested anger. And an emotion that's not expressed cannot die. And the idea with these negative emotions is we want them dead. We want to allow them to die a natural death. And that's a process we'll show and teach to allow people to do that.
Very, very interesting. I think that's so important, Larry, and I want to touch upon a follow-up question on that. Okay. You talk about specifically enough the stress that cause. It's internally how we feel through different things that happen. If a dish breaks and we get upset and angry and start throwing things, or then that leads to two other things that go wrong in our day. If we continue to internalize those things, that is going to lead to more stress and causing us not to perform well at our job, not perform well at home, different things like that. The difficulties and challenges that we deal with on a regular basis, how we respond to them internally is very, very important, right?
Absolutely. You see the incidence of panic attacks. I call them fake heart attacks because they mimic a heart attack.
Yeah, they do.
Even among my own sphere of friends and family, the panic attack incidence is rising dramatically. And all that is, Neil, is what you just talked about. It's stress stacked upon stress, never being relieved, never being expressed, just being pent up until finally we lose it and we break down. And we have either a panic attack or a meltdown or whatever people refer to it as, rather than take a straightforward approach. There's nothing magical and nothing mystical. And it's not always easy, especially as our stress relates to people. Because sometimes we have to get stressful people out of our lives or decide we're just going to live with the consequence. And the consequence can be dire, depending on how bad the stress is and what the relationships are. But there's a process to walk through to at least begin to address that. And I don't mean in a negative way at all. Even with people that are rough in your life that may be causing you stress, there's a way to handle those and handle that gets it to some resolution, because that's the goal. Get it resolved, or you're going to continue to live with it every single day.
If it bothers you, it's going to bother you forever. But you're right, to get yourself around certain negative people that you can get out of your life, that's fine. Sometimes your children, you can't get them out of your lives. Your loved ones, you can't get out of your lives. But if you can learn to handle it and not let it bother you, that's so huge. So let's talk about, what is the self-management sequence and why does it matter?
Well, a lot of people, let's think about this. Our behavior generates results or lack of results, which gives us our joy or our stress. Most people think that their behavior is random, or others think it's hardwired, it's fixed, it's just who I am, it's how I am, I can't change it. Neither of those is true. There's actually a self-management sequence, a 5-step sequence that we all go through that essentially drives every single bit of our behavior. And when we learn the sequence, we learn that we can influence the sequence, change the sequence, or at least the results of the sequence, and have better behavior to go on and live the happy, healthy lives that we were intended to.
Yes.
The people say, why the heck did I do this? Or why the heck did I do that? Well, it wasn't random or a mistake. It was a result of a self-management sequence that you're probably not even aware you're using, but it drove to that result. We teach people where their behavior comes from, so that when you know the source, you can go back and readdress the sequence so you get more of the outcomes and the behaviors that you're looking for.
So key and so important. And if we don't do that, then the results are very, very problematic and you'll never grow. And so kind of to summarize so far in the first show, I mean, I could take each one of these topics, Larry, and you could see me ask you 1,000 questions about it, can't you?
Yes.
And that's why somehow I have continued to be on radio for 9 years and love to interview and learn from people. And it's the greatest job in the world because you could just sit there and learn from others and implement those strategies. But we learned, first of all, we got to take care of ourselves healthy wise by making points to do stuff that will help our aerobic system, help us lose weight, eat more healthy. But we didn't get into much of the nutrition as much as the fact we got to make changes. But then we talked about the stress, which is something that is not discussed a lot of times, and how we have to alleviate that stress. And that has to be part of our self-management plan, not just I'm going to go walk the stairs every day, or I'm going to park further away and walk, or I'm going to walk the track at night, or I'm going to decide to do something like the treadmill or lift some weights or whatever action plan we make, we also have to make a stress action plan in this self-management process. And we have to regulate ourselves in a diary or something to say, are we really accomplishing these goals? Just like in a business, just like in a family, just like in any specific things, there has to be measurable goals so that we reach a result that's going to make us more healthy and happier people, right?
Absolutely. I'm excited, Neil. You do such a great job of this. I'm very excited about starting to dive into each of these pieces and really roll it out in subsequent shows to teach the specifics to people. I think people will be very, very surprised at the simplicity. And, life is simple. It's we humans that tend to complicate it. And the whole, again, as I said, the idea here is to keep things very simple because simple things are doable things. And the idea is we want to get people doing some things that feel good, that make a big difference in their life. So as we get through subsequent shows and doing the teachings and learnings on these various strategies, tips, and secrets, I think people are going to be very, very pleasantly surprised.
I think so too. And I'm getting out information out of you that might not be available yet. But as one thing we're going to have is every podcast will have available show notes as well, available on your website. And we'll talk about that at the end. Again, this is the process of 2019. Very exciting. We're going to make people more healthy and happy. And it's so important. And I'm telling you, we hear these points, but they're not by people that are experts like yourself. We hear some of these tips, but we don't have a plan in action. And that's what you as a CEO of a company know, and how you've changed your lifestyles and how you help others. Last thing is you speak of putting our immune system on steroids, and you've talked about that at times. This sounds interesting. Give us a sample of how that works, because you've kind of talked about starting the process, but now what about putting your immune system on steroids? I love hearing something like that. That's where you come out as, okay, I direct in a huge organization. I direct so many lives, 1 million to say the least, which I couldn't imagine being responsible for that many lives. How can you now take that and go ahead and help the other people and put our immune system on steroids in the same kind of leadership way?
Well, as I said, there's the healthcare system. We've already talked about, how it's faring in America today. The key to putting your immune system, I love to say it this way, putting your immune system on steroids without the steroids. Again, I'm not anti-medication,
Yes.
but it has its place. There are some simple things. I'll give you a quick example. In the human body, there's 3 to 4 times more lymph fluid in the lymphatic system than there is blood, but there's no heart. Like the circulatory system has the heart to pump the blood. The lymphatic system has no pump. And that's the garbage disposal system of the human body. It cleanses our cells and blood on a regular basis. Without it, we would be dead in 24 hours. But it has no pump to move the lymph fluid to get the job done. So one of the things we talk about, and this is simple, it's rebounding. The rebounder is what we might refer to as a baby trampoline. A little trampoline about 4 foot wide. It's only 6-7 inches off the ground. And all you need to do is get on that thing for 10 minutes a day and slightly bounce on it. You don't even have to have your feet leave the surface. Just bounce. That gravitational pull, the G-force is created by the rebounding, moves the lymphatic system like it had a pump and pumps it throughout the body and makes it that more effective, that more active in cleansing the cells of the body and keeping that lymphatic system working at peak state, which is critical for our immune system to work at peak state. That's just one idea of many that we can use. And again, what I like to say is not only are they simple and pretty much free, but they're scientifically proven. They're non-toxic, and they're non-invasive. And why wouldn't any of us, short of a serious medical procedure, want to do everything we can to stack our own deck that maybe we don't need that procedure or that medication, in the long haul.
And a lot of wellness programs don't think of this. They think of just going and getting healthy by working out, losing weight, and not looking at all the other areas. You need to have all those components. And you have a free report for listeners today. How can we get a copy of that?
You get a copy by emailing win@stackyourowndeck.com. win@stackyourowndeck.com. That's WIN, win@stackyourowndeck.com. If you email there and just put in the subject line report, we'll send you the free report. It's 10 ways to put your immune system on steroids without the steroids.
And we can Google Larry Bradley and find all his different social media out there. He's posting every day, providing unbelievable information and content. And also stackyourowndeck.com for more information. You got all these different places and resources. And I look forward to diving into each one of these topics. Like I said, we just have scratched the surface for this podcast, and it's going to be really informative for all our listeners and also viewers on YouTube to really check all this stuff out. So I appreciate the first show. I'm excited to really dive deep into these topics. And thanks again for calling, and I appreciate you taking the time with me.
Hey, Neil, we're doing some great work here, and I appreciate the partnership with you.
All right. Take care, Larry. See ya.
You too.
Bye-bye. All right. That was, again, Stack Your Own Deck.